Picture it. A cramped office on Long Island, 1987. Fluorescent lights humming, a phone book open on a desk, water-stained, pages dog-eared to random names. A 25-year-old man picks up the receiver. His hands aren't shaking anymore. They used to. Now his voice drops half an octave, and something in it sounds like money. That man is Jordan Belfort. He has no finance degree, no mentor, no capital of his own. What he has is a voice, and in about 6 years, that voice will be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Then it will very nearly cost him everything. Belfort lands at a small brokerage that will grow into Stratton Oakmont, founded in 1989. The product, penny stocks worth a few cents a share, in companies that barely function. On paper, this looks like small-time hustling. It isn't. It's a machine, and here's how it runs. Buy a worthless stock yourself quietly in bulk. Call 1,000 strangers and tell each one the identical electric story. This is the next Apple, the next Microsoft. Let the artificial demand you created push the price up. Then sell at the exact peak seconds before anyone realizes there was never anything underneath. Economists call it a pump and dump. It sounds clinical. It wasn't. On the other end of every call sat a real person, a teacher funding a retirement, a nurse setting money aside for her kids. Picture Belfort at a whiteboard, teaching, not markets, persuasion. You don't sell the stock, he tells a room of new hires. You sell the feeling of already being late. He'd written literal scripts, word-for-word sentences designed to dissolve doubt before it could fully form. Research on persuasion backs up exactly why they worked. People say yes faster under time pressure, faster under social pressure, and faster when the voice on the other end sounds completely certain. Belfort ran all three at once on an assembly line. Now picture the floor, rows of desks, phones ringing without pause, young men in ill-fitting suits, some without a college degree, some barely old enough to rent a car. A board on the wall tracks the day's numbers in real time. Whoever tops it gets applause, cash bonuses, a slap on the back in front of the whole room. Whoever falls behind feels every eye on him. This wasn't chaos. It was architecture, built for one purpose: compress the distance between a stranger's doubt and a stranger's decision to 5 minutes. Sometimes less. It worked with terrifying efficiency. Within a few years, the firm was pulling in an estimated hundreds of millions of dollars. Belfort drove Ferraris, owned multiple estates, employed staff whose only job was keeping his life frictionless. He wasn't even 30. At its peak, over 1,000 people worked that floor, most barely out of their teens, trained not to understand the market, but to sound like they did. Ask yourself, why does a good story beat a good number? Almost every time. Because your brain wasn't built to weigh risk with cold logic. It was built to remember stories and recognize patterns. A voice radiating certainty flips a switch buried deep in you. This person knows more than I do. Follow him. Belfort didn't invent that switch. He built a company around flipping it hundreds of times a day. Then there's the excess. Parties that stretch for days. A yacht that sank off the coast of Sardinia. A helicopter he claims to have flown while far from sober. Picture the version of the story Belfort tells about himself. Glossy, cinematic, almost too absurd to be real. Much of it comes from his own retelling, and not every detail has been independently confirmed. That's worth holding on to, because the next part of the story isn't self-reported, it's on the record. A quieter phone call arrives, this one from the SEC, opening an investigation into Stratton Oakmont's trading practices. At first it's a formality, then the complaints start. Not one, not 10, hundreds, people who watch their savings evaporate the instant a stock collapsed, always moments after Belfort's own people had already cashed out. Prosecutors would later determine the firm had manipulated share prices in at least 34 companies, defrauding more than 1,500 investors out of roughly $200 million. Undercover agents work their way inside. Phone lines are tapped. And then, the moment every fraud story turns on, one colleague, facing his own exposure, starts cooperating. That single crack widens into a fracture running through the entire company. In December 1996, regulators expel Stratton Oakmont for good. Belfort later admitted he'd felt untouchable in those years, convinced enough money could smooth over anything. That belief didn't shatter all at once. It cracked slowly, quietly, the way most empires do, until one morning it didn't hold anymore. A man who once convinced thousands of strangers with nothing but his voice now sits in a room where his voice means nothing at all. He's indicted in 1999, pleads guilty to securities fraud and money laundering, and wears a wire to help build cases against former colleagues, including his own partner, later ordered to repay $200 million and who serves 39 months. In July 2003, Belfort is sentenced to 4 years. He serves 22 months at a minimum security facility in California, released in 2006. The court orders him to repay $110 million to more than 1,500 victims. No script saves him here. No line, however polished, persuades a judge there were no victims. Here's the part almost nobody expects. As of this year, that restitution obligation has officially closed. More than 2 decades after sentencing, the court-appointed trustee finished distributing what remained, a payout far smaller than the $110 million he owed. A case that defined 1990s Wall Street excess only finished settling its books in 2026. Stratton Oakmont wasn't an aberration. It was a concentrated dose of something that runs through the entire history of markets. The tulip mania that gripped 17th century Holland, where a single bulb once cost more than a house. The dot-com collapse of the late 1990s, when companies with no revenue looked worth billions on paper. Different centuries, different costumes, the same recipe, a story, amplified by urgency, amplified by the fear of being left behind. People rarely buy a stock because of a spreadsheet. They buy a feeling, the feeling of standing inside something enormous, just before the rest of the world catches on. Belfort doesn't disappear after prison. He gets famous. His memoirs published in 2007. In 2013, it becomes a film directed by one of Hollywood's most acclaimed filmmakers, starring one of the biggest actors of his generation, a box office phenomenon that earns over $60 million in its first 2 weeks, with multiple Oscar nominations. And then something happens that almost nobody saw coming. Part of the audience doesn't watch it as a warning. They watch it as a blueprint. Motivational speakers start quoting it. Sales trainers start screening it. Corners of the crypto and day trading world start clipping scenes from it for inspiration. Same electricity, same pressure, same promise of fast money, just repackaged. A story that began as a cautionary tale about white-collar crime ends up fueling the ambitions of a new generation, chasing the exact same high, wearing a different disguise. Picture the comparison directly. A stranger calls you in 1991. Within seconds, he builds urgency. Within a minute, he drops a number designed to hook your curiosity. Within 5 minutes, saying no feels almost foolish. Now picture a countdown clock ticking under a live stream. 10,000 viewers watching a stranger insist this coin is about to launch. Or a Telegram channel where someone you've never met says this is the last call before it moons. Replace the phone with the screen. The mechanism hasn't changed at all. It never announces itself as a sales technique while it's happening. In the moment, it feels like excitement, opportunity, arriving just in time. Only afterward, once the price collapses and the group chat goes quiet, does the pattern reveal itself. Belfort works today as a public speaker, teaching sales technique under his own name. His past is both his credential and his warning label. Whether the transformation is genuine is a judgment only you can make. The paper trail isn't up for judgment. The convictions, the 34 manipulated companies, the 1,500 victims still owed more than they'll likely ever recover. Not every promise of fast money is fraud. Most people giving that advice believe every word of it. But this was never really about one fraudster from the 90s. It's about a fault line running through every human brain, regardless of intelligence or experience. It doesn't check credentials before it fires. Even professional traders, people who handle risk for a living, fall for it the instant the packaging looks new. Belfort didn't rewrite human psychology. He just found the fastest way to exploit what was already sitting there, waiting. More than 30 years ago, hundreds of young men sat inside an office on Long Island with one shared objective: manufacturing that exact pressure inside someone else. A message lands on your screen. Get in now. This one's going to the moon. Your pulse picks up just slightly. But notice it happening this time. That's the whole difference. Convinced by the facts or by the pressure? Now you get to check. If you like stories like this, like and subscribe. See you in the next one.